Welcome on stage.
So hello again. And I think you've seen a couple of these slides in the past as we were talking about skills as well. So I'll reference to those as we kind of move forward. Very quick introduction. I currently live in Honolulu, Hawaii. I've lived many other places during my career. Spent a lot of times at small and large companies, had a ton of fun working for those. And, in my spare time, I love flying. So I spent a ton of time flying during my free periods. So that's just a little bit about me. Before we get started, one of the things I thought about was, there's so much hype about generative AI and AI in general, machine and deep learning. I'll kind of walk you through a few slides, just a few, at least how I personally level set. They're not technical in nature, but I hope they will get us to an answer, or at least the same level set of what we're talking about here. So first and foremost, these slides, by the way, have been in repurposed for a period of time by me. So you might have seen them in prior presentations as well. So there's the narrow intelligence, which is specifically on a topic, very specifically trained for that particular topic. And then you can get an answer back, typically in terms of search and retrieval, I would argue, as it exists today. There's the general intelligence, which is kind of more broad-based, more entity graph-based. This is how I picture this in my head. More entity graph-based, where you can kind of jump from node to node and get different answers back. And we'll talk about transformers in a second, and how you can actually get a better understanding about a particular topic. And then the notion of a superintelligence that kind of combines everything together. Typically, when people talk about the doom and gloom of AI, I feel like that's where they end up, is talking about the superintelligence, which is like it knows everything, it proactively does everything. How does that work as we kind of go forward? So just so that I have in my brain, I kind of wrote these down as a standard level setting piece. And I'm pretty sure there's many other people much more knowledgeable than me who have better definitions, but I'm trying to get it down to very specific brass tacks of simplifying it down. So that's number one. And I'll get to a slide which talks about the abstraction, the reasoning, and the action on one side, and then the subject areas or the broadening of these subject areas on another axis. And as you kind of do both, you end up in the ASI realm, whereas if you're only doing one, you can argue there's things that currently take action in the very narrow scope of if something happens here, go do X, which could be magical in its own right. And as we kind of learn more and as we kind of apply more broadening strategies or transformations or transformers, we get into the language. So in the current setup, what has happened is with ChatGPT, this again my feeling, we're starting to broaden the knowledge base that we have that was typically narrow in nature, and applying that to multiple different either subject areas or abstraction and reasoning across multiple different subject areas, even though the understanding around large language models was very specific to a particular area, as is the train set. The other one that I keep hearing is generative AI versus AGI or general intelligence. They're just not the same thing. Sometimes they get intersposed. So I thought I'd mention that here from a level setting perspective as well. I think it's pretty clear to most people who spend time in this space, but sometimes it gets confused in the media or in the press or in the general public. So just stating that out loud. All right, spend a little bit of time here. So again, trying to to get it down to brass tacks around what are the various components that make up a truly intelligent, potentially sentient being. So there's a knowledge base that's on the very bottom. Super important, at least to me, the data elements of things, the understanding of data, the understanding of an entity graph, whether you are excited about knowledge graphs, whether you're excited about large language models. I don't particularly care what the knowledge base is, but there has to be a knowledge component to it. There's a secondary component here, which is around memory. So is there a component of, is there a base static knowledge graph, or is there a evolving memory-based knowledge graph? And if you all saw some of the latest updates from chat from OpenAI, they've actually introduced the concept of short-term memory into their knowledge graph or into their large language models as well. So actually very excited about that, because for me at least, again, on a personal basis, the knowledge graph attached to a short-term or evolving memory graph is superbly important. It kind of forms the basis for a lot of things. My general analogy here is we wouldn't be humans if we couldn't remember something, if we didn't have the memory or the knowledge that we could actually keep over a period of time. That's usually the hardest thing that happens when somebody has Alzheimer's. They cannot reference their knowledge that they have. It's there, but you can't reference it. Then on the top is kind of a spectrum. It's from where we started, again, my belief of where we started from representation to some aspect of learning, to then actually being able to say we understand something. With the latest advents, I feel like abstraction has gotten a lot better. Transformers have really helped with abstracting out the various subject areas and then also being able to combine them together. And then there's reasoning and action. And we're starting to see a lot more where you can actually have a long discussion with a chatbot, and it can reason with you. It can actually theoretically answer, 80, 90% accurately how a human would reason with you. And then the last bit of this is action, which is, can you actually take action, both proactive and reactive action on top of that questions posed or proactive thing that needs to happen, and then kind of go from there. So that's how I look at it from a spectrum perspective. I feel like there's a component that actually gets us towards, what people call true AI as we kind of go down the right-hand side. But all of the pieces are important as we kind of go forward. Couple more things here on this slide. The modalities really matter. So one of the things that, again, makes us humans is perception across the various different modalities. So speech being one of them, visual being another, textual, and then sensory. We do a pretty good job at combining all of them to kind of form a context or an understanding, and then being able to abstract those as we kind of move forward. So it's a really interesting set of things that our brain does on a general basis. Typically much harder for a computer to do more than one modality at one given time, or mixed modalities. And so I think that's getting better as well, and we can see that evolving as we speak. So that's just one component. And then the blue bars on the bottom are an updated version of how far have we kind of come along, again, in my opinion, across a lot of these. So I feel like there's still more to be done around abstraction. There's definitely more to be done around reasoning and proactive action. Most of our systems are still very reactive in nature. I feel like there is a bit of work left to get to more proactive action. All right. This one is an interesting one, as, again, most of you already know, machine learning, deep learning, a lot of the components of intelligence have been around since the 60s, the 1960s. But what, in my opinion, got really good in kind of that 2015, 2016 era was the GPUs, the TPUs, some of the new processing units that are coming out, hybrid units that are coming out, have really accelerated a large component of the various types of learning. And then on the graph here was just a thought exercise as to what is growing faster. What is the slope of some of those pieces that are growing faster and faster? I actually wrote this particular slide in 2017 with little to no idea of how fast transfer was going to go vis-a-vis supervised learning. I haven't changed it just so that we could actually have a discussion. I'd be curious to see how other people think about this because obviously transfer has done a much better job than supervised. So the slope should probably be higher on that one as compared to the rest. So it was a curious look back in time to see what has gotten better and not as well. So it was a fun one for me personally. All right, the next, let's talk about engineering, product, and design. So that was just a level set, and then now actually a couple of slides again on how this is changing for APD. So a few things that come to mind. IntelliSense has been around forever. I was recently went back and kind of started to do a little bit more work just on an individual personal basis. I was, as I mentioned, I'm a pilot. I was like, I'm going to go build something that, is a fun one for learning how to take speech data that is very specific pilot speak data and convert that into human readable format from a really bad, internet connected broadcast of that pilot speech, and then convert it into textual form as a result. And it was really interesting. And I only mentioned that because it kind of pushed me into trying to learn a lot of different components of either open source technologies that are out there or some of the IDEs and how they have evolved. And I found that IntelliSense has changed a lot. It now will recommend blocks of code for you as you kind of move forward, which was pretty new since I hadn't gone back and coded in a while. This was just my nights and weekend project. So it's been there forever. We've been using it for a long period of time. Search, we all use Google search or some of the other components of helping us during the course of coding. So we've had those for a long period of time. The second one is around knowledge enhancement. I don't know about you, but it's super hard to keep track of all the changes that are happening across various components. Things have accelerated quite a bit. So the knowledge doubling, which I think about 5 or 8 years ago, IBM had posted a knowledge doubling graph of how fast will knowledge double, going from years to months to days to hours. That is happening today. I was at a conference and one of the speakers there was jokingly mentioning that he has one person on the team who does nothing but watch papers that are being produced on a daily basis and trying out those papers to see if they would be useful or not for their particular work. And that is all that person does, all day, night. And he's having a hard time keeping up. So I think part of the AI assistive technology is going to be helping us filter what is the knowledge that's out there and what's applicable to your particular problem set. And I'll leave out the whole notion of the bad knowledge that's out there as well, that people are deliberately introducing. We can talk about that in a separate conversation at a different time, probably over a beer. And then last part is around co-development. A lot of us have done, Scrum team development, or if you do full-on XPP or XP development cycles where you're doing co-authoring of code or doing test-driven development. The ability for us to actually use machine and deep learning for better test-driven development, I think goes a very long way for us as we kind of move forward. So some of these things have been around for almost decades now. I know I did like my first XP project in 2005, I want to say, and doing co-development in full TDD. So they've been around for a long period of time. Now you just have a more AI assistant available to kind of go down that route. This one is a little bit of a tangent, but I thought I'd mention it here. As you kind of look back in what makes a good EPD person, like an engineer, a product manager, or a designer. This is some of the data that Google did from their 2008 behavior study to try and see what makes a really good employee. These were the six-ish things that came back as a result. And if you notice, none of these are inherently true in an AI system today, but are inherently true for. And I'd be curious to see your takes on it as well. But I find are inherently true in a lot of our employees that are performing well during this period of time. So the ability to have a passion for something is really important. Read a quote about that recently. It's like, it was a Russian scientist, I believe, who said, AI won't actually happen when an AI can answer a problem. AI will have happened when the AI has a passion to answer that question, which I thought was pretty interesting. So from that perspective, these components are superbly important in terms of getting to why humans are important in the loop, at least again, in my opinion. And the skill sets that I believe we both have and can develop further to deal with any changes that are coming. All right. I think this is my second to last slide. So the initiative part. So how do we actually start to take proactive? One of the things I find as we are navigating the shift as EPD is I do hear a lot of, oh, that won't help me. Like this whole, AI thing that's happening out in the, in the world. Yeah, that's not really going to help me. It really can't help me write code. It really can't, do any of those things that they're touting it does. And I find this actually quite fascinating because to me, as a change agent, EPD as a change agent, we have to be embracing, not saying, oh no, not on my turf. So I feel like there's an aspect of embrace that I don't think we have done personally again, and I believe that we should do a lot more in EPD. Things are changing. Change is a constant, and it is important for us to actually take that change and manage that change. How are we going to do better? How are we going to do some of the components? And one of the things that I'll give you as an example on our team that we're doing is we are starting small with all the things that engineers don't like to do. And an example of that is unit tests. Can we help using assistive technology have the code creator write unit tests while you're writing code? And if that is a possibility and we can actually start to do that, it goes a very long way in kind of solving what I typically hear is the biggest part of engineers, bane of existence. Like, I don't want to test my code. It works perfectly. I don't know what you guys are talking about. And that could be a good start. And then from there, it can be, suggestions. We use IntelliSense today. Why not actually use it for writing more unit test code? The second part is like, if there's capabilities or outcomes that, are important to an EPD organization, let's define those. And then based on that definition, let's make sure that we're actually, adding those to our list of AI capabilities. How can you say for that next person that you want to hire, can that be a co-development bot? That could be a possibility. Because again, it's about maximizing the throughput that you, on a personal basis, the outcome that you can do, the outsized outcome that you can do. So embracing that is superbly important. And then the last part is, please don't ignore it. Actually take the initiative initially, either personally for you or for your team or for your organization, and say, how are we going to use this? What is the, for me, it's always vision, strategy, and theme and execution. How can you build that vision and strategy that actually embraces some of the changes that are coming, and then take it from there? So that would be my my ask to all of the team here. Oh yeah, a couple of words of caution. There are some issues with some of the large language models, especially because it's been trained on the internet, and the internet lies, as we all know. So it does have some issues. And then the last one being, it could be a really easy way for a lazy engineer to go get stuff done, but it doesn't mean it's right. So you still have to be in the driver's seat making those final decisions. And I'll leave you with this last piece of work, which is really about change. It's a constant. It's here. It's kind of the first time it's here from a technology perspective, where EPD organizations are starting to think about, well, how does this impact my role, my job, my my raison de being, raison d'être, just so that we have a plan for it. But it doesn't mean we ignore it. This happened during the Industrial Revolution. This has happened during the voyages early on, when the world went looking around for mineral and resources. Things change, and I do believe it's maybe the first time that it's changing for EPD, but I think it's a good thing. So I do believe it. Nice. I took 12 and a half minutes, so perfect. Right on time.
Right on time. Thank you, Japjit. We have 15 minutes left for questions. So everyone, please go to the Q&A tab. Make sure to add your question, can be anonymous or not, and please vote for the questions you want me to ask. The first one comes from Eric Nguyen. A lot of people in the audience are engineering leaders, engineering managers. So what changes about what we do as organization leaders if we assume that many engineering tasks will become 10x faster, higher quality, cheaper? What changes, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is something that it's top of mind, Eric. Honestly, one of the reasons, and I'm going to switch my screens here, sorry, real quick, so that I can see you guys and talk to you guys. So one of the things that I believe it's going to be important is, what's the constant refrain that a person or team or an organization is asking for? Is I need more people to go get something done. So from a perspective of how does it work? I do believe making a proactive today plan of how we can use better assistive technologies is important. As things like IntelliSense and such came along, they just came very quietly. Nobody ever saw a sea change in those things, but they have made our lives better. I can't imagine now going back to an IDE and just writing code, purely in IDE. For those of you who've kind of written code in Python, recently, I didn't realize how bad it was to actually find all the libraries and make sure that they all lined up with the right version sets and so on. I can only imagine how much pain our engineers go through on a daily basis trying to actually solve that problem. It's I got to get my right version, my right virtual environment set up, and so on to actually go down this route. And so we invented a whole new thing around virtual environments just to solve that one pain problem. So to me, this is really about accelerating the engineering tasks and getting better outcome or doing better tests, better lab projects, better learning, faster, stronger than we can do today. So if you can accelerate your pace of development, why wouldn't you? and then go let things pick out the winners from the projects that you want to do. If you could just accelerate that list. I don't know about you, but my list of backlog is much longer than the number of people that I have on the team. Period. And if you all have done all the work that you have on your backlog, well, then bully for you, because I don't know how you do it, because our list is like 2 years long. So if I can help accelerate any of that, I want to do it as much as possible. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, but that was my comment back. It's like I have a very long backlog, and anything I can do to help accelerate that in a quality fashion, I would like to do that.
100%. I think a lot of the engineers here are way more productive, so just get more things done with the same resources. The next question is actually related from Aditya. How do you think leadership roles will be impacted if orgs we now need fewer engineers for the same projects? Are we just going to have the same number of engineers and they're just going to do more, better, more reliable things? Or are we just going to have smaller engineering teams? What do you think?
I don't think we're going to have smaller engineering teams. I think the pace of hiring human folk to help do the work will slow down, perhaps. But as is always the case, like we look to skate where the puck is going, and so the puck is telling us that we won't hire boatloads of folk to actually go solve a problem if we can solve that in better, smarter ways. And
Okay.
and the reason I say that is, if you look, all of you are engineering managers, vice presidents, CTOs, CIOs in the world today. Most of our issues of scale, human scale, comes from actual people problems. It doesn't come from technology problems.
Yep.
And so the way I think about this is like, if we can solve some of our problems, period, with technology, why wouldn't we? It doesn't mean we slow down hiring, but it does mean we can get better outsized outcomes, or better outcomes, period, along the way. So the technology components are super important. I was on a panel, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, and the first question that they asked me was like, should schools ban ChatGPT? And I'm like, great, you should do that. And while you're doing that, you should ban books, and you should also ban Google, and you should also ban all the other pieces that have ever, helped a student learn in this period of time. Why would you? Like, that is literally like saying I'm going to handicap myself in terms of any of the work, or handicap a student in any of the work that they can do. But what it does mean is that schools have to evolve to not just make sure that somebody answered a question. Schools have to evolve to make sure that the student understood the problem. They understood what was happening. I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old, and it's a conversation in my household at all times. As my daughter is going to college in a few years here, short years. It's a discussion we have all the time about how would you use technology to actually better enable you to get to the outcome you want. So I'm very bullish, just for the record. I believe in technology fundamentally. And so as engineers, I believe we have to fully embrace and not say, oh, yeah, not invented here type of scenario. So that's just me.
I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. We're already talking about it with my wife, about what are the values we want to get to our kids later, how to embrace technology, what are the fundamental things that are never going to be replaced by AI. So I get you. So 100%. The next question is actually interesting, because it's something you just touched base on about people and processes. So it's from Dell. Dell. I see people and processes, not code and technology, as the most common blocker in large organization. Do you see AI being used to change this area that commonly lag in effectiveness versus individual contribution? What do you think?
Yeah, Dale, I couldn't agree more. I do believe like scaling a organization, almost everything has to do with people and process, very little to do with the technology components of it. Um, it's a great question. I actually don't have an answer for you, honestly. Just I'm just ruminating now, thinking out loud here. Um, I would love it if there was something applied to it. I don't believe there is anything that I see today. Um, we've seen things like, and this is a tangent, but things like Glassdoor and Blind as, organizations use that as a marker for what's actually going on within your teams and such, just to get a better feel for how the organization is performing. Pulse surveys, Glint surveys, whatever you use, as another marker for getting to understand. Those pieces of software and technology are starting to get better, so they are trying to understand more. Of what is the social dynamic aspect to it. But I don't know of anybody applying, and maybe somebody else in the organization the chat can pipe up. I don't know of anybody who's actually applying organizational theory or social dynamic theories to organizations to kind of solve it using AI. But it's an interesting space. It's a great point. Like maybe there should be a startup on that or two that can actually apply that to make it better. But I don't know of any, honestly. I don't know if
So
anybody else
that's
does.
if I might chime in, the reason why I and my co-founder started Plato in 5 years ago is exactly for this reason, Dale, is that we see people and process and people management and leadership as the most common blocker in many organizations, small and large. And so we want to help engineers become better leaders, make better decisions, being better managers, leaders in anything. So one small contribution that we do is with the help of AI, we can now analyze way more data about whatever is happening in mentorship calls. So Japjit, you just talk for 20 minutes about something you're passionate about, and you just answered a couple of questions. Now all of this is in our system. So next person who asks the same question could be matched with you, Japjit. So you can find the perfect mentor or the perfect recorded video about these exact same questions with the use of AI that is transforming whatever has been said into text, into something that is searchable and easily searchable, and then in the future matching the right person who has the same question with the right mentor or right content. It's something that we're working on these days. So I guess
Yep.
it's a small contribution to people and processes improvement overall for the engineering leadership community.
And that's great, Kwang. I think you and I were chatting about this in one of our chats. I find myself a lot of times the mentees have very similar questions
Yeah,
to questions that we've answered already. And, if there was a way to kind of get that answer back to them sooner, because they don't have to wait for a slot and
exactly.
actually then explain the problem and such. They're like, oh, yeah, I think I know what the answer is going to be. And then it's actually even more meaningful discussion if you still have the discussion in person, because they're already kind of ready with the answer, so to speak. And I would say, much more, in my opinion, fun discussion, because you can have that back and forth. Because mentorship to me is always a back and forth. There's not somebody is delivering a tablet from the mountain. This is 100% a two-way street. So
Yeah. We're gonna have time probably for two or three more questions. I think two. Next one's coming from Ron. It's the most voted question. What do you think about the different LLM and relative strength? OpenAI, Anthropic, Hugging Face, Mistral AI.
yeah,
Any quick advice
yeah.
or opinion?
It's super hard, man. Hey, Ron. It's been, I've been testing out different things locally. And it's, by the way, if those of you haven't tried it out, like actually testing out some of these environments on your local machine, it, I say this jokingly, but it's kind of like the power of Google on your local laptop. Turn off your Wi-Fi, and you can answer almost all the questions that you would have posed Google, today or at least 2 years ago, and get an answer back. it is pretty wild. Like when you do that, or image generation, or speech to text, or vice versa, like all running locally on your machine with relatively low, power usage. It's pretty bananas. So to me, I think it's going to end up, again, specializing for the various components that you end up trying to build. What has happened is some of these large models are also building on top of each other. Um, I heard the Hugging Face co-founder recently as well, and their whole point is open source is how they were built. They want to open source more, and their platform is really about helping people open source some of their technologies, and then provide back history on where is it coming from, because that's also not clear today. Like a lot of the language models are pretty opaque in terms of how the learning happened, and so the ability to and people are building on top of each other quite a bit in this world. So it will be interesting. I don't know which one will win. I hope not one wins. I do really believe that it has to be a mass. Um, if there was a crystal ball or prediction run, I would say that it will end up being systems that use various of these models in the appropriate fashion, or going back to the knowledge graph theory of mind, something that actually can actually evolve faster for your personal needs. So, what is it important to you as you kind of think about it, and provides you enough good guidance along the way? I think will become important versus one particular model. I doubt there'll be one model that will change the world.
We have one last question. The CEO of GitHub, I think, said that 80% of the code in the future will be written by AI. So Alexei is actually asking the questions on how to prepare. How do you think engineers and managers with the expertise in traditional backend and front-end skills can prepare for AI experience becoming required to get jobs of tomorrow? What would be your
Yeah.
advice?
Um, Spend time, like invest in it, your nights and weekends. I cannot speak more about this. One of the valuable lessons I learned in my time at Google was you cannot stop writing code. It doesn't matter what your level is, honestly. You better be able to write code all the way through whatever level you are, even if it's nights and weekend code. Um, um, on a personal basis, I still spend time doing side projects, not because I actually need a side project, but I will go do it because otherwise I have no idea what an engineer is doing on any given time frame. And I cannot talk to them. How am I supposed to talk to an engineer and explain or talk
Yeah,
about something if I don't know what's happening in the world
yeah,
today? So you have to invest the time personally in learning whatever is happening in the world today. So find a side project. I wrote an app for my wife, who's a marriage and family therapist, just for the sake of, she doesn't use it anymore. She ended up using a professional based one, but she used it for a couple of years, which was great. I wrote a little app for a watch for pilots, just because I wanted something for myself. And the only reason I do these is just for learning. Like, it has nothing to do. I'm not making any money off of it whatsoever, but I get to learn something new. I'm like, oh, why did they do it that way? Like, that's kind of weird and funny, or stupid, or good. And then you learn something new. So please don't stop learning something new. Um, and it applies very much to AI, because it's going to change a lot, like a lot, very quickly.
yeah.
So
No course or lesson will really be up to date within 1 or 2 months. So, to add on what you just said, Japjit, I started 6 months ago to code again. Not only it's fun, but I'm way more relevant now making decisions with my head of engineering than what I was before. It's been 5 years I didn't code, and I just got back to coding 6 months ago. And with the help of ChatGPT, I almost feel there's nothing I can't do, although it's complicated or not. With the help of ChatGPT, there's nothing I can't do. Obviously, there's a peer review, and sometimes they don't pass, but you know,
Yeah.
it's fine, and it's way more fun, and I
Yeah.
will make way better decisions
Totally.
with this.
And just for the record, I'm glad yours. Sometimes your code passes. Mine openly get laughed at when I send any code in. So it's not
You know
like
how,
like I'm not winning any awards here. Like that's not the point. Again, that's not really not the issue. It's like do you know enough to be dangerous? So you're relevant at least. So.
yeah, exactly. Never stop learning. I think it's what we can conclude this live Q&A with. So thank you very much, Japjit,